All right, I want to then show you how to teach handwriting and go through a few steps just really explicitly. So the goal of handwriting instruction is to develop rhythmic, automatic muscle memory. And it's really important to understand this. Good handwriting has rhythm. People who have good handwriting write consistently, automatically. They're not thinking about how to form each letter. And if you have to think about it, that's going to disrupt your process when you're doing composition. Because you're thinking, how do I write this? But it's automatic and it has a rhythm to it. Students who struggle with handwriting write in a jerky fashion. They start, they stop. They don't have this automaticity that leads to this rhythm. So handwriting instruction should always begin large motor skill, even if you're remediating a 5th or 6th grader or an adult. Because fine motor instruction is very abstract. If you think about motions like this, they're very tiny and they're hard to understand. And the brain does not differentiate between large and fine motor. If you know the pattern large motor and you have fine motor, you can do it fine motor. So you can learn a pattern large motor and you can see it clearly. So one of the strokes would be swing. And we began with strokes. We break down the instruction systematically. So the first stroke would be swing, and you have a whiteboard, so you could practice this. You can start on the baseline with your pointer finger, large motor, swing up to the midline. And then it just becomes swing. Go ahead and say it, swing. And if the student has good skills and can hold the marker, go ahead and do it with the marker. Go ahead and make one with your marker. Swing. Another stroke is down, and it starts on the midline and goes down to the baseline. And notice there's a little hook, down. I'm going to model in cursive, down. Same principle is true to manuscript. And it's very important that you have students saying these things out loud, saying the lines, saying the stroke names, because this is multisensory learning. And these strokes you're going to see build into letters. Then we have dot. Put a dot halfway between the midline and the top line, dot. Okay? So we teach strokes. Then we teach how to write the single letter phonograms. And I teach these, and I suggest you teach these grouped by strokes. So often we begin with A and then teach B. But A and B are formed very differently. And so instead, you will see with the handwriting charts that we have, that they are grouped by swing letters, by curve letters, by strokes. It doesn't matter which stroke you start with, you can mix that up. But if you begin with the stroke, you'll notice that each time you're going to begin in the same direction. So for this presentation, we're going to begin with the swing stroke. And you'll notice you could teach all of these letters with the swing stroke. And if you're teaching cursive, in manuscript, I think the first one on the page is straight. So you could look at that, but it's learning that same motor skill and practicing it. We are also going to teach the sounds at the same time. So we're not going to separate phonogram instruction from handwriting. This is part of unifying it because it's a multisensory experience. So we'll show the students the book face version. What does this say? Let's say it together. I, I, E, ya. And I want you to have A through Z down cold tomorrow, okay? Because you will have all 74 by Thursday. And if you get behind tonight, it'll get harder and harder, okay? All right, and then we can compare them. How does the cursive compare to the book face? Book face being a typed font. So what are the similarities? The dot. Anything else? The straight line. And then there's these little connectors, and that's to make it easier for my hand. Then we're going to learn how to write it. You put your finger on the baseline, swing up to the midline, down to the baseline, pick up your pencil, dot. Let's do it together. Put your finger on the baseline, swing up to the midline, down to the baseline, pick up your pencil, dot. And that becomes swing, down, dot. Let's do it together. Swing, down, dot. And those shortened directions are in bold. That's the rhythm of handwriting part. It's emphasizing the rhythm that the letters are formed with, which helps the kids to remember that. Encourage the students, again, to say this aloud. It's really important, and it gives you feedback. Let's try one more. What does this one say? Let's say it again. U, I'll teach you how to write it. Write it, say the directions, and then say the sounds, okay? So put your finger on the bass line, swing up to the midline, down to the bass line, swing up to the midline, down to the bass line. U, Let's do it like this. Swing down, U, One more time. Swing down, U, Go ahead and write it with your pen or markers and do that. Okay, so explicit directions. I have another video. I really hope.
Today we're in Logics. We're going to learn.
This is Estill, South Carolina.
We're going to learn how to make a cursive. We're going to make this phonogram in cursive. Now, let me give you some directions. Listen very closely. You would actually start halfway between the midline and top line. You're going to curve to the top line, straight down to the baseline. You're going to bump to the top line, straight down to the baseline, bump up to the top line again. Then you're going to go down. Okay, I'm going to show you on the board, and then I'm going to give you a chance to practice in the air. You would start halfway between the midline and the top line. You're going to bump up to the top line, straight down to the baseline, bump up to the top line, straight down to the baseline again. Then you're going to bump up to the top line again and down. Now we're going to try it again, but this time I want you to try it with me with your fingers in the air. Are you ready? All right, fingers in the air. Start halfway between the midline and the top line. Curve up to the top line. Straight down to the baseline. Very good. Bump up to the top line. Very good. Straight down to the baseline. Bump up to the top line again. And down. Awesome job.
And I have one more video for you. They then move to their desks and they begin writing.
We're just going to say curve, straight, bump, straight, bump, down. Again, we're going to say curve, straight, bump, down.
You saw their handwriting. This school is getting phenomenal handwriting results with explicit instruction, and the kids are engaged. They're really engaged through it. You might think, wow, do I really want to spend that much time teaching one letter? But let me tell you this, if you do not, you guys can testify to this, your staff will spend years remediating this. And your kids will struggle with this for years. So this instructed correctly in kindergarten and in first grade saves enormous amounts of time for the rest of the staff and a lot of pain for the students, okay? And it doesn't take that long. I mean, a few minutes really to teach each letter and then to practice. The other really great thing about these instructions is this: if a student forgets, how do I make a, usually if you start going curve, roll, they'll go, oh yeah, curve, roll, swing down. And they'll just, it's their cue. They suddenly remember with those cues how to write the letters as they're forming them. So the way you need to deal with this with essentials is they have to be able to write A through Z really to really begin lesson 1. That's why those pre-lessons also have handwriting in them. But most older kids, and that's lowercase. You can work in an uppercase letter every day or so after that and fill in the uppercase. But most kids can handle 3, 4, even 5 letters of the same stroke at the same time when they're in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. So in a week, max, you can have A through Z down and having them write well. Christy, how long did it take you at summer reading camp?
We did about 5 a day.
Yeah, because I don't think we understand the feelings that students have about their handwriting. Handwriting is deeply personal. It's a deep reflection of who we are. And if you think about it, a lot of students now are graduating from our schools without having a signature in cursive as well. And I don't think that's a good thing. I'm going to say this too. If you have a school that has to teach manuscript and decides to switch to cursive in 2nd or 3rd grade, do not let the kids ever hand in anything in print. Just mandate it. Because I think one of the biggest mistakes I see with schools in that situation is that they dabble. And then the muscle memory issues become even harder. You can overcome muscle memory that you've learned wrong or that you want to teach in a new way. It just takes more time and practice and focused effort. And I'm going to tell you an observation from myself. I naturally have atrocious handwriting from my childhood, okay? And what's really weird to me is this. I don't write very often by hand. I used to journal every day. When I journaled and I began to learn all this, I began to journal in cursive and I could write just beautifully. And then I could just do that automatically. But then it started to fade if I didn't write. And then if I do practice teaching, like when I did a lot of the video work that's on YouTube, all of a sudden I had good handwriting, but then it started to fade because I don't use it every day. Yeah, and this is a great thing. If you're doing essentials, a lot of kids don't know all the sounds of A through Z. It's a great chance to go, okay, we're not really going back to learn the alphabet, we're learning cursive. And by the way, U says 4 sounds. And so it's a good way to sneak in that information. All right, let's go on a little bit more with practice. Practice should begin large motor. Especially young students need lots of large motor practice. And you'll notice in Foundations A, there is no required writing on paper. There's optional writing on paper, but it's the whiteboard. It's sidewalk chalk. It's large motor practice. And here's another classroom from Kaleidoscope. And she did a great multisensory activity. It can be multisensory too, and this is in the classroom. I thought this was great.
The 2 phonograms in our English language that make the sound. One's at the beginning, and the other one is at the beginning or the end of English words.
So they have Play-Doh, and they're doing a tactile writing activity. This is a little bit more fine motor, but what I wanted you to see was that in the classroom, it is very possible to not just do writing on paper. And she did this very, very well. They got out, they rolled out their Play-Doh, they wrote several, they rolled it, they put it away. It was hardly disruptive to the class. And they love it. They love it. So just that inspiration that it doesn't always have to be pencil and paper, and you should do lots of large motor. So there's ideas on the screen here for large motor practice. You can use a handwriting chart, which would be a lot like the whiteboard. You can use finger paint. If you've ever put finger paint in Ziplocs, that's fun. Shaving cream. Even older kids, I did a tutoring group one summer where I had a group of young elementary school students followed by a group of 4th and 5th graders, and the 4th and 5th graders wanted to write in shaving cream when they saw the younger students. So doing that practice, sidewalk chalk, writing on the whiteboard, large motor skills from the elbow, from the shoulder, fine motor skills from the fingers. So salt boxes, practicing those strokes. If you need to work on fine motor separately, so if you have 5-year-olds who are struggling with writing, they don't need to practice fine motor by writing. They can practice fine motor with Legos and beads and stringing things. All of that is really valuable. That play, fine motor play, is valuable to develop their writing. Because if they can do a, aw, and then they have the fine motor skills, it will transfer. It'll be very painful if they don't have fine motor skills, and some 5-year-olds don't. So again, in foundations, fine motor writing is optional in A and B. All right, once you teach the individual phonograms, in cursive you need to teach how to connect them. This is super simple in cursive for most of the letters, because you'll notice it becomes, you just start the next letter straight from the baseline. Most kids just even figure it out from that point. The only trick is that a few of the letters begin with a dip stroke, end with a dip stroke at the midline. And here I just explained to them, it's a little bit like the O decided to end with their hand, and the O is holding onto the T's foot. And I even have sometimes kids stand like that. And so then it just becomes a little swing into there. And most kids pick this up very quickly. Now I want to contrast this, because if you're teaching manuscript, same principles, teach the strokes, explicit instruction, all of it's the same. But if you're teaching manuscript, you have a different problem, and that is the fact that when you space letters, you have to have a lot of sophistication in planning. So look at this C, it curves back. A curves. Then a lot of kids will put too much space for the T because these letters maybe got too close together because they didn't plan well. And then this curves. So do you see how this becomes really tricky? So you need to give them a lot of practice to visually, spatially plan and develop those visual spatial skills in manuscript. All right, how do you hold a pencil? I get asked this all the time, so I'm just going to address these things, how to teach this. Anything that allows fine motor movement is fine, in my mind. Some people get very particular about the 3-finger grip, the 2-finger grip. But really, if you can move the pencil fine motor, then it's fine. But if you've locked it on like this, can you use fine motor this way? No, so then you're going to need to do something to help that student. I suggest buying different pencil grips. Different companies encourage different styles. Have them in your classroom. And if a student's struggling with grip, talk to them about how writing is with your fingers. And then say, you can choose and try these different pencil grips, and whichever one is most comfortable for you, give them that choice. You can use until you become comfortable holding it this way. It's also important to show how to tilt the paper. And I just want to talk about this briefly, because a lot of people look at our phonograms on the handwriting and go, they're tilted. Isn't that hard? Why do you tilt them? They're slanted. Well, here's where the slant comes from. So you can do a little experiment with me right now with your whiteboards. Put your whiteboard at a straight perpendicular to you. Take your marker and then just open and close your elbow naturally. And you'll notice the line goes diagonally across the board. Do you feel that? Just making a sweeping line. Now, tilt the whiteboard and open and close your elbow, and you'll discover that you can find the angle that follows the lines on the page well. Do you see that? Just by tilting. Did everyone feel that? No? Okay, so if you tilt, then when you open your elbow, if you're at the right angle, it just follows your elbow opening and closing and follows those lines. So what happens is if you do not tilt your paper, you end up with this elbow that's really crowded. But this is how you create block face letters, because you have to have your paper perpendicular to create a block face letter. If you have your paper tilted and you write, when you untilt your paper, the letter looks tilted. It comes from ergonomically positioning your paper correctly. So tilted. Yeah. And do this little activity. Help them find that angle. And left-handed, it's tilted the opposite way, because that's ergonomically how the elbow opens. You also need to teach the other form of handwriting. When you teach cursive, I'm not saying never teach manuscript. Manuscript is really important for filling out forms. But what you're going to notice is that if you've taught curve, roll, swing, down, it's like, okay, now the curve part, you're picking up your pencil and it becomes swing, curve, roll, swing, straight. It's very related. And students tend to be able to move to manuscript just fine. They have a lot of this motor skill. They learn when to pick it up. But you want their, ideally, what I suggest is you want their cursive skills fluent. They need to think a little bit to fill out the form, not very much. They have this skill. But it's the cursive that's just super fluent, and they can write and write and write. Okay, last few tips, and then you're going to do a small group. Do not trace. So most handwriting programs, and if your school has this, please throw it out or don't use it, look like this. Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay, do you remember the definition? Rhythmic, automatic, muscle memory. And what do kids do with this? Dot to dot. Is this rhythmic, automatic muscle memory? This is a visual activity. It is not developing muscle memory. So don't do this. Teach the strokes and teach them explicitly. And then don't use copy work until you've taught it explicitly. That means don't ask a student to write this if you haven't taught them how to write this. Don't ask a student to copy a sentence. If you're in a private school, copy work's very often very common. Don't ask them to copy a sentence if they can't read it. Use a variety of mediums, which is what we've seen. And then I also wanted to say this. I want you to think about line size, because kids have very tiny hands. So many kids write very well with very tiny lines. Many kids need bigger lines. So when you look at the handwriting in foundations, you're going to see multiple line sizes. This isn't because you want the kids to write on all the sizes. It's because you can say to them, why don't you write on the small line, the medium line, the bigger, the biggest line? Which one is easiest for you? Which one looks the best? And then they can choose their line size that's most comfortable to them and use that one throughout the program. Same thing with rhythm of handwriting. There's multiple line sizes because then they can choose what's best for them. And we do this as an adult with college rule and regular rule paper. We just give them more options when they're learning to write. By the way, this is like a 4-year-old's cursive. Wow. Isn't that amazing? So, and here's about a 6-year-old learning some of this. Paula, where is yours?
Start at the midline, drop down halfway below the baseline, pick up your pencil, dot. Start at the midline, drop down halfway below the baseline, small swoop, pick up your pencil, dot. Very, very nice.